Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. South African equities fell dramatically on Thursday, and this is a major indicator of how markets are responding in South Africa to global and local events. Nearly 1 trillion rands in market value has been wiped off the markets this week alone. I think from the get-go, this is a reminder that politics and business are interconnected. They are two sides of the same stick. Sometimes people act like there's this gap between the law, the economy, and the politics of a nation. They'll say things like, don't make it political. Don't make it political. As Eminem said, it's all political. If my music is literal, then how am I a criminal? You may know that reference. But the point is, it's all political. There's no gap between politics, society, economics, and law. There's no gap between the actions of lawmakers and leaders and how those actions affect the behaviors of business leaders, businesses, shareholders, and the actions of workers and customers. These things are interconnected. Sometimes people say, no, aren't you a political analyst? Aren't you? It's connected. You can't look at one side of the coin and not the other side of the coin. That's how you get scammed. That's how you end up with a fake 100 Rand note in the Johannesburg CBD. By not checking on both sides, by not checking things that are interconnected. So the markets have been taking a hit, and there are three things that are going on. Locally, there's the risk of the Government of National Unity, this coalition that was formed by the ANC with 9 other political parties, the main partner in that being the Democratic Alliance, which has said that they're going to court to fight the budget that the ANC wants to be approved and to implement. So the GNU stands the risk of falling apart and being reconfigured. We've seen Gayton McKenzie telling John Steenhuisen on social media to send his letter of resignation from the cabinet, from the GNU. That already is something that has caused markets to be in freefall. Internationally, second reason, we've all observed that Donald Trump has effectively started Trade War 3 as the prospect of all of his reciprocal tariffs are taking effect. That is having an impact on the markets. It's having an impact on the currency. And it's one of the things that we're seeing happening here. You know by now, and you've seen it covered all over the place, on the 2nd of April, President of America, Donald Trump, announced the implementation of new reciprocal tariffs affecting numerous trading partners, in fact, affecting the whole world, including South Africa. Lesotho affected much worse. Botswana, I don't know what they did, they affected much worse. These measures, they introduce a baseline tariff of 10% on all imports into the US, with additional country-specific tariffs based on the US government's perceptions of trade imbalances and practices. For South Africa, an additional 20% tariff has been imposed, which culminates all of the tariffs to being 30% on all South African goods entering the United States effective of the 9th of April, excluding platinum mineral group metals. Effective on the 9th of April. This is having an effect on the markets. This is what Donald Trump had to say.
If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%, 10%. Bangladesh is 74%. So you see what's going on.
Markets are also reacting to the issue of the VAT increase, which is around the corner. This is something that will make things more expensive for consumers and reduce consumer spending on services and goods. From May, things are going to go up, and it's going to be an exorbitant cost that will happen across the value chain. The Trump 30% tariff will add to that economic pain. I made a video on Sunday already showing how the 25% car tariffs which you already announced will affect the auto industry, which you can find on the Mighty Jamie TV channel on YouTube. You can find that right now. So all of these things are affecting the markets. The markets have been taking a pounding. There are two indices to watch and to be aware of. The first one is the All Share Index, and it is the primary stock market index in South Africa. It represents approximately 99% of total market capitalization of all eligible securities which are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange main board. This makes it a comprehensive benchmark for the performance of the South African equity market. The second one is the blue chip index, right? And that's the top 40 index. This index tracks the 40 largest companies by market capitalization on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and it represents over 80% of the total market cap of JSE listed firms. So how did these two indices perform? The All Share Index plunged by as much as 4.5%, the biggest one-day percentage drop since 2020, when investors scrambled for cash in the COVID-19 pandemic. The index didn't do well. Now, when you look at the top 40 is the one where money managers try to have these stocks such as Sasol, stocks such as MTN. This particular top 40 index took a hit of 3.3% in one day, right? One day. So you can see the JSE has been brutalized. SA stocks have actually been on an upward trajectory this year. The top 40 index started the second quarter with record-breaking gains, building up on more than nearly 10%, which was picked up in the first 3 months of the year. So things were going well until this week happened. Even though Donald Trump has spared platinum from the tariffs, producers such as Impala Platinum, Anglo-American Platinum, Sibanye Stillwater still took a major hit, falling between 5% and 8% on the prospect of reduced demand from its biggest consumer in the vehicle industry due to the tariffs that are being placed on Europe, because they need to supply that to the European car manufacturers. And if they're not making cars at the same volume because they can't sell the same number to the Americans, which is one of the biggest markets in the world, then that's going to have an impact on how much they're going to need platinum. So you can see the impact, and it's affecting South African stocks. It's affecting the market. Other companies that took big hits included Sasol, which went down by 13%. MTN, it went down by 7%. And on the other side of the equation, the value of gold briefly surged to a record high of $3,160 an ounce. And you need to be aware, when the markets are unstable or in times of economic commotion, many people go to gold as a store of value. So the fact that the markets were falling in this way and that gold prices were going up shows that some people moved their money off the markets into gold, which is viewed as being a safer, place to place your money if things are going badly. Before I go on with this episode, I want to remind you that the Book Lab is live, and tomorrow there's a new book dissection. We're looking at this best-selling book, over 50,000 copies sold in South Africa, The Stellenbosch Mafia, and it looks at characters like Rupert, characters like the Steinhoff billionaires, and we're going to look at this book as well, The ANC Billionaires. These books are by the same author. Look at the concept on this side of BE and its creation of billionaires, and looks at the concept this side of how Afrikaner nationalism created a set of billionaires who then began to dominate and still dominate the South African economy. And we're going to examine these books to get an understanding of how communities build wealth, what is the right way to do it, what's the wrong way to do it, and to look further into that. Also coming up soon, I always talk about this book. It's a great book, Manufacturing Consent by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky. And there are various things that are happening to manufacture the consent of the public. You need to understand how governments and companies manipulate us into supporting what they're doing. What makes the Book Lab so special, so different, is that we also do synoptic reading. We do synoptic and analytical reading. We're building a community of readers and leaders. And by the end of this year, we'll have gone through some amazing books. And if you haven't read these books and you want to, get the cliff notes, that also can be of value because you've got limited time. You can't always read these dense books, etc. We're going to get you the gist of the big ideas, and you'll be able to have a conversation on these books and understand what they're about. Obviously, we recommend getting the books, reading the books, going to a library, going to the bookstores, supporting these authors, and actually making sure you have the book in your hand. So the book lab is a members only section of the channel. We're doing deep dives into big books, books on culture, books on business, books on economics, books on key figures in business, politics, domestically and around the world, because the world is interconnected and we need to understand what's happening to make decisions for our lives, investments, and also to understand when to make moves and when not to make moves. A large part of the problem with our political discourse right now is that we've stopped being research-driven. It's become about slogans, about personalities. Stop being about ideas. So join the book club now by clicking the join button on the YouTube video or on the YouTube page. The big book said, "My people perish for lack of understanding." The song said, "Ilifa lezithutha lidliwa ngabahlakaniphileyo." Both of these sources, if you will, are trying to indicate that the problem of poverty, oppression, suppression, depression comes from a lack of understanding. And the solution comes from getting understanding. Both the scripture and the song are saying our problems are being caused by a lack of research and knowledge and understanding. So we must begin with knowledge and use that knowledge to create real wealth and power for Africa, for Africans. That's something that we got to do. That's the big aim of the book club, to make this channel part of the conversations that will take Africa to the next level. We got to do it. And we got to make sure we can, because we're seeing organizations going to America to tell Donald Trump all kinds of things. We're seeing think tanks all around the world determining the future of Africa. But where's our African think tank for Africans? We have to use platforms like YouTube, platforms like book clubs to renegotiate the narratives about Africa and the future of Africa. So let's go back. Let's go back to the conversation about equities and what's been happening. So there's one of the guys here who is a mining equities analyst at SBG Securities. His name is Adrian Hammond. And he was speaking at the PGM Day conference, which was held on Thursday, and he said the following. We're talking about industrial metals, and if tariffs are in place, we're talking about a lower growth outlook. The tariffs are directed at end products. The reaction of these platinum group metals is perfectly validated. If you take a deep look at autos, the US consumes a lot of platinum group metals. And let's say that the autos decline 10% this year because of the impact of higher prices. You're talking about 200,000 ounces of palladium, which is not going to be purchased. So this shows, this quote, this expert speaking about it, why these Trump tariffs have caused the losses on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. But also, the Rand has lost most of the gains of the last 3 months. It's trading at levels that were last seen nearly 3 months ago. And today actually hit the 19 Rand mark. $1 US is to 19 Rands a few times today. And bond yields, which are a measure of the return an investor can expect from a bond investment, have gone up. The South African bond yields have gone up by 0.52%. Bond yields are now sitting at about 11.26%, which is a significant change from where they were in January at about 8.94%. And that's a percentage change of 26% in this space of time. A higher bond yield means the following for a government which issues bonds. It means, one, increased borrowing costs. Higher yields mean that the government must pay more to borrow money. This can lead to increased costs for financing public projects and managing national debt. 2, negative economic outlook. Rising yields often reflect investor expectations about future economic conditions, including inflation, interest rates, policy environment. Higher yields signal concerns about fiscal policies, economic growth, and a variety of factors. They show lower investor confidence. Changes in bond yields can reflect investor confidence in the government's ability to manage its finances and coffers changing. Higher yields indicate reduced confidence or increased risk perception. This is where we are right now. And fundamentally, everything that's happened also indicates that AGOA is basically going to be over, one way or another. Trump's decision to impose this tariff on African countries has effectively ended the benefits of the American Growth and Opportunity Act, which was meant to provide, countries duty-free access to the U.S. for products such as cars, textiles, minerals, agricultural goods. Trump has ended those pathways. And companies that are manufacturing, assembling in South Africa, such as VW, Audi, BMW, all of these companies and exporting to America are not going to be able to do so anymore effectively or at a price that makes sense. It's going to be the same whether it's coming from Germany or coming from South Africa. So that's going to have a big impact. So you can see, even though AGOA still stands to be reviewed by Congress, at this point, Trump has negated it because of these tariffs that is imposed. So that's one thing that we need to be aware of. And then you need to also be aware of this big story. At the same time that this has been happening, a congressman, Ronnie Jackson of the 13th District in Texas, has introduced the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025, which would mandate a full review of the bilateral relationship between the U.S. and South Africa and help advance President Trump's foreign policy agenda by giving him the tools necessary to impose sanctions on corrupt South African government officials who choose to oppose America's adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran. Right? And he's joined by Representative John James from Michigan's 10th Congressional District in co-leading this legislation. The congressman said the following: South Africa has brazenly abandoned its relationship with the United States to align with China, Russia, and Iran and terrorist organization, a betrayal that demands serious consequences. He said, this legislation ensures that we conduct a comprehensive review of this supposed ally while also holding accountable any corrupt officials. The era of governments undermining American interests without repercussions ends now. So all of these things are making markets react. And also, you need to be aware that the end of the GNU is also making markets nervous. What happened on the markets on Thursday is as a result of the American developments, but the local developments. The end of the GNU is making markets nervous because of implications for both President Ramaphosa and for major provinces like KwaZulu-Natal. If the Democratic Alliance leaves the coalition, the ANC may not be able to hold on to KZN. Currently, the province is led by IFP with support from the Democratic Alliance and the ANC. The MK party had 45% of the votes in the province, and they could end up crossing the line in a coalition in the province with EFF and one more actor. As things stand right now, the IFP is staying with the ANC because they are in a good position in KwaZulu-Natal where they get most of their votes. And they're also trying to manage how the Expropriation Act affects the Ingonyama Trust, which manages over 30% of the land in KwaZulu-Natal and is under the authority of the king. So they're trying to navigate that relationship, which is why they supported the VAT, which is why they are staying in position, in line. They don't necessarily want to, undermine their own political interests in KwaZulu-Natal. But if the DA leaves that coalition, things may take a turn for the worse for all of these coalition partners, and it could very well be the case that MK ends up running KwaZulu-Natal. Something that the markets are not necessarily enthusiastic about because it will strengthen Jacob Zuma's hand and it will strengthen his authority and it will strengthen the position of MK because they will be able now to demonstrate how they can lead a province. And they will have effectively jumped the line and gone to a place where the EFF has not even been able to go. Something that they don't want. KZN is a big economic hub and is a big province, and it has the largest population of voters, in terms of by province. So markets are nervous about things like this. But on the other side, if the DA leaves the coalition, then the president himself is more vulnerable to a vote of no confidence in the short to medium term, perhaps even before the ANC elective conference. There is a picture that was circulating on social media. I don't know if you saw it. This picture of Julius Malema, Kwere Mantashe, Dumiseni Ntuli, and, all of these people in the same corner, Paul Mashatile, having a chat. It's caused commotion because people are saying maybe there's something that President Ramaphosa is not seeing. And maybe he is rushing himself out of the presidency without even realizing it, right? By agitating and being confrontational to the DA and not necessarily, giving them some of the things that they're asking for. The Democratic Alliance has been a buffer for President Ramaphosa in the eyes of the market. If there's a new coalition formed and then a new scandal breaks, could be a scandal in relation to one of the ministers close to him, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni or Thembi Simelane. They've all faced allegations of corruption pertaining to their time when they were in municipalities, Palawabora, and also somewhere there in Limpopo where Thembi Simelane was the mayor. Which town or city was she the mayor of? Remember, she was accused of moving funds into VBS and getting all kinds of kickbacks as a result from that, from a middleman who was working to get those funds into VBS Bank. And these are well reported upon, and they seem to have a lot of evidence backing these. So a story could break out, News 24 could start doing a push. You must remember that Boris Johnson ultimately was removed by a scandal that wasn't even about him. It was about one of his members of parliament. He defended that guy, and it led to his fall. So this could be a situation that could show up any time from now. And there could be a motion for a vote of no confidence. And in the event that the DA has left the party and John Steenhuisen and Helen Zille are not willing to back President Ramaphosa anymore, he may not have the votes. Because even within the ANC, there are people who are waiting for an opportunity to go a different direction. Remember, at some point, John Steenhuisen said, we're not gonna vote on Phala or vote against President Ramaphosa in Phala a while ago. They may change their mind on that. And that is something that the markets are aware of, because that story in and of itself has got 1,000,001 question marks. And those question marks are legitimate, right? And that's what is making the markets nervous. That's what is making the market nervous. If the GNU collapses, it could very well be that there could be a Paul Mashatile presidency before the 2029 elections and even before this elective conference. This is what is making the shareholder on the JSE nervous, in addition to the global issues, in addition to the Trump trade war 3 and the VAT increase. All of these things are coming together at the worst possible time. They're coming together at the worst possible time. I want to ask you, though, do you think these fears are justified or unjustified? Is President Ramaphosa falling into a trap to push the Democratic Alliance out of the GNU? The voice note that he leaked, or was leaked by people around him, suggested that he's had enough. The Minister of Finance, in his speech, suggested that no, they've really had enough of the DA. Why does the DA want to be in the GNU if they don't want to vote for the budget and oppose the budget? But then the question is, would that move, removing the Democratic Alliance from the government of national unity, be a self-sabotage for President Ramaphosa? Would that move be the end of his time in public office? Would that be the checkmate that his political rivals within the ANC and close and around the ANC are waiting for? What do you think? Let's have a conversation in the comments. See you there.